Good afternoon, welcome. Here is a representative list of the topics Phil Schmidt and I discussed over the course of my 16 years at Southwestern College. The fact that Kansas was once covered by a vast inland sea. The pros and cons of the Oxford comma. Whether it is possible for literature about football to be as lyrical as writing about baseball. Whether the use of red ink in editing student work amplifies too much the nervous reaction of freshmen to criticism of their writing. The sideline demeanor of Southwestern basketball coaches. Women's suffrage in the American West. The merits of calculating the statistic chi-square by hand versus just letting the computer do it. For all those conversations we had, I love Phil and I cherish his memory. Here's a representative list of the topics Phil and I never had a conversation about during my 16 years at Southwestern. Whether the budget of Southwestern College was currently covered or was likely to be covered soon by a vast sea of red ink. The demeanor of the college's academic dean or its president. Ways I might improve my English usage. For all those conversations we never had, I love Phil and I cherish his memory. The things Phil thought about, talked about, and cared about call to mind these words from Paul's letter to the Philippians. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, think on these things. We are sad today, but we are gathered here to heed Paul's advice and to think on Phil, who was honorable, true, lovely, of good repute, and worthy of praise. Again, welcome and thank you for coming.
Would you join me in a prayer? Oh God, it's in times like this today that we both have a desire to have you comfort us and yet also resist your loving arms due to our own confusion or grief or pain. It seems that our ability to find solace may betray our grief and loss. Today, as we celebrate the life of Phil Schmidt, your servant, we pause to lift up broken hearts and questioning minds. And yet, our memories of Phil do bring a smile to our faces, and we are grateful for his life. O God, the Prince of Peace, we ask that you would be present here among us. In our celebration of Phil's life and in our own lives, we ask for comfort and peace. In your name we pray. Amen.
Good afternoon. I have a hard time here. I'm Scott Heck. I was one of Phil's students back in the 80s. My wife Shelley was too. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to celebrate Phil's life today by reading scripture. I've got some introductory comments. All of us here are builders. I think I'll claim all of you. Because of our connections to Southwestern College and the community, Phil was more. For nearly 50 years, he gave freely of his time and talents, and he was a primary builder of this community. Phil built lifetime learners, flexible thinkers, who are unafraid of knowledge, who are free from doubt and fear, with new ideas and differences. They were unafraid to challenge and cast off dogma and ideology but everything under the light for examination. He sent a lot of us in the right direction down the path with a running start toward challenging preconceptions, toward reconciling false dichotomies. For me and others, a false dichotomy between, for example, religion, Christianity on the one hand, science, scholarship on the other. How did he do this? How was he able to build without alienating? He had a tinge of an alienating quality that manifested sometimes in these little red wagon wheels. I don't know if you know about those. He was a little bit of a self-anointed Don Quixote on a quest to rid the world of poor grammar. But that was the only tinge of alienation. He didn't care. He'd use a red pen. That's not a big deal. Otherwise, how did he do this? Well, his knowledge was exhaustive. His facts were incontrovertible. His manner was impeccable. But there was more. Phil didn't embrace building this Southwestern community for personal gain or because it was cool. He was a builder of this community. He succeeded beyond any earthly measure because he was genuine, because of love. I'm going to read today what I've been told is one of Phil's favorite passages. It's the love chapter from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It surprised me. I heard I was supposed to read if it was one of his favorites. It surprised me this was one of his favorites. I was kind of hoping and enthusiastic that it would be something quoted by a founding father in a debate about the ratification of the Constitution. Something about New York City seceding from the state in protest, something like that. But no, it's the love chapter. Phil lived it. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 through 14. If I speak in tongues of human beings and of angels, but I don't have love, I'm a clanging gong or a clashing cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, and I know all the mysteries and everything else, and if I have such complete faith that I can move mountains, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give away everything I have, hand over my own body to feel good about what I've done, but I don't have love, I receive no benefit whatsoever. Love is patient, love is kind, it isn't jealous, doesn't brag, it's not arrogant. Love is not rude, it doesn't seek its own advantage, it isn't irritable, it doesn't keep a record of complaints. Love is not happy with injustice, but is happy with the truth. Love puts up with all things, trusts in all things, hopes for all things, endures all things. Love never fails. As for prophecies, they will be brought to an end. As for tongues, they will stop. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. We know in part, we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, what is partial will be brought to an end. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, reason like a child, think like a child, but now I'm a man. I've put an end to childish things. Now we see a reflection in a mirror, then we will see face to face. Now I know partially, but then I will know completely in the same way that I've been completely known. Now faith, hope, and love remain, these three things, and the greatest of these is love. Pursue love.
I simply can't find the words to express my gratitude and appreciation for Phil Schmidt and what he meant in my life and the ways that our paths have crossed. Words do not come to me that are adequate. This is the context. I first met Phil when he was 26 years old. I was 29. We were freshman faculty at Southwestern College. There are in this room several people who came to Southwestern on that year and started their careers. Max Thompson, others have been here all of that time. And so I go back to that moment and I remember thinking about how fortunate Southwestern College was that this new, soon-to-be PhD from KU was going to be coming here to Southwestern College. As I think about it now, I think that we today should be thankful for Phil, but we should also be thankful for the Baptists that started Ottawa University back in 1865. Think about that. The Baptists of Kansas wanted to go east for their education, so they put it in Ottawa, but Phil came from Michigan and from Illinois to Ottawa because he wanted some life other than his life that had started for him with his family as a possible engineer. He wanted to launch out on his own, and he was so bright. Some dean or some admissions staff person at Ottawa University said, "We've got to convince Phil to come to Ottawa." And they did. And then he graduated, and then he came here, and he has blessed us immensely. I was the one that came to this college when it was decided that required chapel would not be a part of the scene. In fact, I agreed with Dean Hamby Barton and Dr. Stroll that I really didn't want to come here if I had to administer a required chapel. Phil Schmidt and I got acquainted when our daughter was 2 years old, and nearly every chapel of the 7 years I was here as chaplain, Phil was there. Nearly every chapel. And not only just there, but emotionally supporting. I asked people out in the hallway who were students coming back, I said, "What word describes Phil best for you?" And they said, "Caring." Oh, I experienced Phil's care. My goodness, I did. I asked someone else in the hall, "Well, he was bravely gentle and gently strong." And oh, he was. If you were going to tangle with him, you wanted to know when and why. He was gently strong, so gifted, and so committed to his life as a teacher. Frederick Bruckner says that vocation is where your deepest gladness meets the world's deep needs. Is there any doubt what was Phil's deep gladness? You all know what it was? It's teaching, loving students, caring for them. The deep gladness that was Phil's met the world's deep needs, and lives have been transformed and changed in enormous ways. I want to say to you also that I appreciate the fact that Phyllis and the family called me a week ago Wednesday. They called Mary Lou and me when Phil was in the process of learning what was happening to him. We went to the hospital and we were with Phil for a conversation the night before he died. In that process, Phil told me again how proud he was. 46, he wanted to make it 47, he wanted it to be 50. And as he told me, "Carl, 46 good years," I said to Phil, "Bravo and thank you." And he died before I got to see him again. So Phyllis, we're here with your family to tell you that we care for you and we love you. We want you to know how important Phil has been to us. And there is a blessing that an author who is a writer from Ireland has said that I think is important for you to remember. May you see the reflections of Phil's kindness and beauty in all the tears that fall before you. When I learned that Phil had died, I cried. And I'm glad that the poet helps me say, as I cry my tears, I see the reflections of Phil's excellence, beauty, kindness, and caring. So be it.
Good late afternoon to you. Ooh, Phil would be shamed. Good late afternoon to you. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away. Revelations 21:4. I love memorial services. And I think part of it is because I grew up with a mother who was a pastor. So I've been to lots of memorial services. But in my 20 years here, I've been to additional lots of memorial services. And the thing I love about memorial services is, if you do know the person, you feel like you're with other people that enjoy the person and got that particular person's sense of humor. And it allows you just to begin the process of healing. But if you didn't know the person, you kind of felt gypped a little bit, like you missed out on one of the greatest people you should have ever known. And over this last couple weeks, I've learned that for myself. I got this Facebook message from Allie when her dad passed away. And it was one short sentence. It said, "My dad died." And it was one of the hardest messages I'd ever received because I was flying on my way to St. Louis. And for some reason, I was traveling through Dallas to get to St. Louis. And when I got to Dallas, I couldn't go anywhere. All the flights were booked to St. Louis, and there was no other way to get to St. Louis, and I couldn't come home, and I was stuck at the Dallas airport all by myself. On the day my friend had died. And I didn't have anyone to champion me. I didn't have anyone that got it. Nobody else in the Dallas-Fort Worth airport understood the legacy of Phil Schmidt. If I had shared it with anyone, they would have thought that I was crazier than I probably already looked. And I was frustrated. But I got on that rebooking flight, I got on the rebooking phone, and I told that lady I wanted to come home. I didn't want to go to St. Louis for the weekend. I wanted to go home. And I remember my friend Lonnie Boyd picked me up and I said, I want to go back to where things make sense and I understand what's going on. I needed to be back with my Winfield family. My name, for those of you who don't know me, is Dawn Plus Bailey, and I have known Phil for 20 years. I came here in 1994, and I was, a neophyte, wet behind the ears, didn't know nothing, was in a job probably bigger than myself. And one of the first friends I made was Phil Schmidt. And do you know what he asked me to do? He asked me to co-teach a class with him. Now, if you look at my undergraduate transcript, you would wonder if something's going on with him. But that semester was amazing for me. I taught a class with Phil Schmidt, Dr. Schmidt. At that time, he'd been at the school 27 years. I was barely 27 years old at the time. I got to see his mastery in teaching. I got to see him love and cut up a student at the same time. He let me teach. He let me grade papers. And after that, I kind of had a little swag at Southwestern. Some faculty members thought maybe that little chocolate brown girl maybe did have a little something. Then in about 1998 or 1999, I decided I wanted to stretch out and get my master's degree. And before I went to another institution, I wanted to take a class and see how I could do. So I took the exciting class from Phil Schmidt, my first master's class, Research Methods. Met Mondays, 6 to 9. And if you've ever had one of them Phil Schmidt classes, oh Lord, you start at 6 and you do not end till 9 o'clock. He got that decrepit folder with them pieces of paper that look like they're all crumbly that he's going to teach you stats on, and he carefully folds each one over so that he doesn't miss anything. I tried to work that man for an A, and my charm did not work with him. He made me work. He made me stay tonight. He didn't care what my excuse was, what my pity party was. He made me sit there with all those other newly mastered students. And I got an A. And I went on to get my master's degree, and I did exceptionally well. Then in 2005, I got accepted into a doctoral program. And I was in my first class, and I was nervous about this paper where I was going to write. And so I took it to Phil, and he said to me, let me look at the paper because I don't want you to embarrass Southwestern when you go out there to that expo. And so, of course, he tore up my paper and then explained to me each and every mistake that I had made along the way. And of course, again, I got an A on that paper. Phil taught me to love to learn. Not to learn, but to love to learn. When you love to learn, you don't care what the obstacle is. You don't care what the problem is. You're in there fighting. Anyone that knows me very well knows that I love now to research. And after I got my doctoral degree, I started researching this college because not only do I love to learn, not only do I love to research, I love Southwestern. And through that love of learning, I would scour through the yearbook. So I've seen all these pictures of Phil. And if you go starting in 1967 on forward, his hair gets different heights, his glasses are a little different, his shirts are a little different, but in every year, it's consistent. It's Phil. And so today when I was on campus, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm sure everyone's had a lot going on. And every time I opened my mouth to complain, I thought about Phil. Phil never complained. Phil never said he was working too hard, or he wasn't making enough money, or his office didn't have enough space, or the whiteboard wasn't clean enough, or the door didn't close properly, or he didn't have his own parking spot, or whatever things that we normally complain about. Phil just worked. And I guess I would say, as I see schools around us struggle, presidents leaving, places having down enrollment, stuff going on, Southwestern just keep on ticking. And I think it's just all about that Phil spirit. It's about that each one of us, we just rock and roll here. We just do what is required to make this be a special place for these Southwestern students so that they will love to learn, so that they will give back and be committed to Southwestern. And so I sing on a hard day to the family. Thank you for sharing your dad with me. Thank you for allowing him to see something in that little 27 little brown girl that didn't know nothing. And let him see me through what I became. And no, he didn't finish his 3 extra years. I've been here 20, I guess I can put in another 3, and we can just call it good. So I just want to say, hey Phil, we're going to be okay. We got this. Amen.
I've been asked to share a performance of a song that Phil liked to perform. But before I do that, I would like to just share a few quick memories that I've had of Phil. I took his American National Government class, and I know probably a lot of you have. At that time, he had class participation points. It's been a lot of years since I was in that class, but I like to talk. So anyway, I got good grades in his classes because of that. I remember him saying to me, Steve, I like you. And your views aren't as radical as some of the other conservatives in the class. Even when he might disagree with your point of view, he respected and always maintained that same level of respect in his class for others. I will never forget learning about the tariffs and how politicians would go down and act like they were pro-tariff, and then they would act like they were anti-tariff, depending upon wherever they were in the country. I remember him being adamant about that. And I also, you probably remember if you've taken his class, about his concern about the iron triangles of government. I don't know if you've heard of iron triangles or not, but I'll never forget it.
he was so adamant about the fact that government programs and agencies, once created, will live forever. He was adamant about that. I'll never forget that. Lastly, his granddaughter, Autumn, is the daughter of my step-nephew. Whenever I would be in a gathering with Phil, he would always tell the people, be it at the church or here at the school, that we were in a long roundabout way related. And I will always appreciate this. I will always appreciate his willingness to include me in the family, even if it's a long roundabout way, and I will always appreciate that. Phil had a special skill of being able to sing Yankee Doodle to the tune of the Southwestern College alma mater. And vice versa. Apparently, he sang this composition in public several times for lucky groups at Southwestern College. But first, he sang it in the No Talent talent show. And the family has said that this was a special gift from Phil, and I've been asked to sing this arrangement for you today in his honor. So this is as if Phil was doing this for you today. Did you know that you could sing Yankee Doodle? Remember how he would get that finger up there like this when he's talking about... Did you know that you could sing Yankee Doodle to the Southwestern College alma mater? Yes, you can. Let me show you. Yankee Doodle went to town, riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat, and called it macaroni. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. Did you also know that you can sing the Southwestern College alma mater to the tune of Yankee Doodle? Yes, you can. Let me show you. Far above the Walnut Valley on a lofty height stands our noble alma mater bathed in golden light. Lift the chorus, speed it onward o'er hill and dale. Hail to thee, beloved Southwestern alma mater, hail. Far above the stir and bustle of this busy town, reared against the arch of heaven, looks she calmly down. Lift the chorus, speed it onward over hill and dale. Hail to thee, beloved Southwestern alma mater, hail. To the heights she calls us daily, alma mater dear. Heights of knowledge, hope, and courage, free from doubt and fear. Lift the chorus, speed it onward over hill and dale. Hail to thee, beloved Southwestern alma mater, hail. Hail to thee, beloved Southwestern alma mater, hail.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Nicholson. I was a colleague, a student, friend, you name it, of Phil's. We hung out a lot. And he'd be giving me a really hard time right now if he saw me having notes up here to do this, just so you guys know. Over the past 10 years, I've had the privilege of seeing Phil in many different lights. As a professor, mentor, colleague, and friend. The very first time I met Phil was in 2003 on a Southwestern College visit. He was the very first person besides the people in admissions that I met here. And after introducing himself, the very next thing he said to me was, "Do you know the difference between a comma and a semicolon?" I said, "Well, yeah." I got my mom sitting there, I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Okay, we can be friends then." Great. I found out so quickly how important grammar was to Phil, but I also found out at the very same time how much he loved teaching and learning, but most importantly, how much he loved and cared about all of us. You find out quickly as a history major that the farther along you go, the fewer and fewer and fewer there are of you. I know there's some other history majors out here with me that can contest to that one. But this is the image I will always have of Phil. How much he cared about us, how funny he was, how so very intelligent he was. But most importantly, how much he loved and got us to love history, which is hard if you've ever, some of you who don't like history, it's hard. But during my senior year, I was working on my senior research project for Phil and Dr. Woodward. And I took my paper in and I said, okay, Phil, let me have it, read this. And he was reading it and he gets about halfway through and he stops, looks at me, we're sitting in his office, and he says, you know, when you started here, you weren't that good at grammar. But I think you might be learning something from me. Oh, yes, maybe. And then he laughed, of course, always laughing. And then patted me on the shoulder with the "you'll be fine" pat. And if you've ever gotten this pat from Phil, it's kind of one of those, I'm gonna be fine, but you're still gonna mark the heck out of that paper you're looking at. I'm going to regret it later. But that was Phil. That was him all the time. Along with his written word, Phil had a lot of phrases that he used all the time in his classes. One of my favorites was when Phil would talk about Pogo's aphorism, which says, we have met the enemy and he is us. And I am telling you right now, he could fit that into any conversation. Any conversation. You could be talking about fruit and Phil could find a way to fit that in. Okay? One of the other things that he always talked about was when we would ask if we could do something, like something different in class. One day we asked about going outside. Could we go outside for class? And Phil said, okay, we will decide this like Abraham Lincoln. Great. We might be in trouble now. And he said, all of those in favor of class outside say yay. And of course all of us were like, yeah. And Phil said, and all of those say nay. And Phil goes, nay? And without skipping a beat, looked at us all and said, and the nays have it. Okay, we're not going outside. Thank you. But the thing is that we would always have all these things we'd be supposed to do for class, whether it be assigned readings or discussions or something like that. And sometimes we would never even talk about them because we would get off on a completely different subject. But it didn't matter, because to Phil, as long as we were learning something, everything was fine. It didn't matter. One of my favorite times with Phil was always sitting in the lunchroom with Phil. And you can ask anybody, somebody in here has sat with Phil numerous times in the lunchroom, whether it be lunch, dinner, something, and you never knew what the conversation was going to be about, ever. I remember talking history, math, sports, teaching, students, you name it, Phil was in. It didn't matter what we were talking about. One day, there was a group of us sitting there and we were talking to Phil and a couple people proposed the question, you know, Phil, if teaching doesn't work out, what are you going to do? Mind you, this was like 2 years ago. And after much discussion and different suggestions and things like that, we decided, and Phil loved this, that he was going to be an NFL referee. That was the job. But that's Phil, and I think that overall is some of the things that I'll remember most about him, was just how funny he was. Phil would have been successful at anything that he did, but fate proves that to us, he was in the right profession because of his impact on all of us. And I'm so very honored, to come and talk to you about some memories of Phil. Thank you.
My notes are in my tablet, I hope it doesn't fail me. A week ago, today, our staff in Chicago, the Chicago Center, we were having kind of a monthly get together, try to take a little break from work every month and celebrate birthdays and so forth. We call it First Thursdays, but we'd had a lot of things going on, you know, for that Thursday. So we decided to switch it to Friday instead, and we called it Fabulous Friday. So and I guess to make it really short, that's when we got the word. And we all just kind of stopped because just a few years ago, you know, Phil would be celebrating with us. So we all knew Phil. That's been represented here. We knew his humor. We knew his wit, his sharp intellect, you know, his grammar Nazi side. We knew all those things. We'd had a lot of fun with him. So our Fabulous Friday, I won't make it through. Our Fabulous Friday became sharing those memories. Many of you don't know me. My name is Scott Cheeseborough. I'm the Executive Director of the Chicago Center for Urban Life and Culture. Our program in Chicago that some of you know because you were students there. Some of you know because you're coming as students. And we've worked at Southwestern for a long time. I'm here on behalf of the center and for the family, for the college. I want to acknowledge both Phil's relationship to the Chicago Center as well as the relationship that the staff and myself developed with Phil and his family, really, during a sabbatical that he did with us, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that was about, in 2009. And then subsequently, when we visited Winfield, we got to spend time with the family and with Phil. It's been particularly meaningful to me to have been able to spend time with the family this week, with Phyllis, with Phil's children, and with his granddaughters. In the fall, just this last fall, I went with Phil to the Walnut Valley Festival. You all probably know how close that was to Phil's heart, and I don't think he missed the Walnut Valley Festival, maybe since its inception, I'm not sure. But just, you know, before that, Lane and I have been on campus. Lane's my son, he's here with me today. We were hosted by Phil because he's the representative of the Chicago Center on the campus. And as usual, Phil had our schedule ready with all of our class visits. And it will be very difficult, really, to come back for the first time in 25 years and not be greeted by Phil. Before that, Phil had come to Chicago as part of our Council of Advisors. He has the record, he has, I guess, many records. I think maybe he has a record of the longest tenure here, I'm not sure. But he has a record of having attended the most faculty forum council meetings in Chicago
annual meetings since 1990 of any other faculty liaison. And that means that he, every year, came to our meeting. I'm confident that there are people in attendance here today who were influenced by Phil to come to the Chicago Center. And there's probably people here today who are being influenced to come to the Chicago Center this fall. Chicago Center, for those of you who don't know about Chicago Center, is a study away program which includes an urban immersion experience and credited seminars and internships throughout the city in every major and discipline. Phil became the Southwestern College liaison to our program, which we have a liaison on each of our 30 campuses, about 25 years ago, and advised, frankly, many of the students who decided to come to our program. Phil had a unique ability. We've heard about Phil as the master teacher, and he certainly was a master teacher. But he was also a master student, a master learner. He had a unique ability to learn from his students. And the insights that students brought back from Chicago to Phil's classes only heightened his desire to tap into whatever their experience was in Chicago. He believed in the experience, but he became increasingly intrigued with the transformative impact that that semester or summer, even January term, had on students when they came back to his classes, and he determined to become a student at the Chicago Center. He decided the best way to understand his students' experiences was to have it. And I respect him for that. I don't think that's a decision that everybody makes easily. We don't always learn easily from our students, but Phil was one of those people. So Phil was kind of devising a plan to get to the center, and he had a sabbatical coming up. So he asked me if he could do his sabbatical at the Chicago Center, which meant that he would move to Chicago, away from his family, spend 4 months there, and do whatever we wanted him to. He didn't really say, I want to do this, or I need to do that, or I'm going to be researching my next paper at the University of Chicago. He just wanted to be in the program. Well, you know, Phil, as you, particularly students, have noted, you know, he's a heavy hitter. He can't just, you know, sit in the office and answer the phone. So I had to think about what could Phil do that would benefit us, but recognize, you know, what he brought. So over the years, the Chicago Center has seen many students come and go. And the center has had an impact on their lives, and I knew that. But I knew that lots of other people didn't know that. And there was no way to really share those experiences with people who might be interested in what happened to those students at the Chicago Center. So I asked Phil, because he had research skills and he had writing skills, if he would be willing to interview alumni of our program so that we could compile some form of book or something that would represent their experiences, and he agreed. So Chicago became a home base from which Phil traveled all over the country. He traveled to the West Coast, Seattle, Los Angeles. He traveled to the East Coast, New York, Baltimore. He traveled throughout the Midwest. Sometimes he flew, sometimes he drove, took the train, took a bus. And everywhere he went, he interviewed alumni. He interviewed over 24 alumni. And kept a tape I think one time he forgot to turn the tape on, but that was about the only slip there was. I mean, as you know, Phil is meticulous, and I knew I could trust him. He always found the interviews, he always followed the arrangements that we made, and he brought back, you know, the interview. But besides his hallmark attention to detail, which has been aptly noted, Phil demonstrated this other ability to really get alumni to talk and to share intimate stories, particularly kinds of stories that related to their experience at the center, which was exactly what, you know, I was hoping would happen. When I listened to some of the interviews, I knew the sabbatical had been a real success. And, but what are we going to do? We have all these tapes. So, along with another Southwestern product, an alumna, Ashley Holloway, I don't think she's here today, is she? No? Phil transcribed and transformed these interviews into a booklet, a book that we published for our 40th anniversary that captures not just the interview questions and answers, but the stories of these 24 people that he interviewed. We were able to finish it in time for our 40th anniversary, which Phil was part of, in November of 2010, in October, I'm sorry, of 2010. Between those interviews, though, Phil, he had really come to do this program, so he became a full participant in the program. He attended all of our staff meetings, and of course he always had the supersized Pepsi that he was famous for. But he was a true participant, and he helped us with decisions, and he entered into conversations with us. He became a frequent patron of the Mellow Yellow, which was our local diner. And he became very proficient in using public transportation. Phil, who had never really ridden a bus or a train much before he came to Chicago, was able to take other people around the city and help students find their way around when they came in for new semesters. He also joined students in the program when we traveled throughout the city to Chicago's famed neighborhoods, where the Chicago Center has developed resource persons. We call them First Voice. They help us understand the issues in that neighborhood, or, you know, the things that are happening in their community and how things are changing or not changing, or good or bad. And Phil was always the one who could ask the question that everybody else wanted to ask, but really were afraid to. He read the students' journals because he wanted to know what they were learning. He truly became a student of his own students' learning. Became a student of his own students' learning. By the time he left, it's rumored that he was starting to cheer for the White Sox, which is pretty remarkable for a lifelong Detroit Tigers fan, really. I have often thought that Phil actually left a part of his heart in Chicago when he left Chicago. But much like the liberal arts that Phil was committed to and talked a lot about, he committed his whole life, really, to teaching and expanding students' knowledge and awareness. Chicago had had an indelible impact on his own vision and person. In preparing to try to capture Phil a little bit today, I ran across a quote that I thought really fit well, so I'm going to read that. It's from an ancient Chinese philosopher that you all probably know, Lao Tzu, famous for Taoism. It goes like this: watch your thoughts.
Watch your thoughts. They become your words. Watch your words. They become your actions. Watch your actions. They become habits. Watch your habits. They become your character. Watch your character. It becomes your destiny. I think throughout this week, and certainly today as well, one of the things that is reiterated is that Phil's habits became a part of what makes his memory so accessible. His solid color shirts, his pen, his khakis, sneakers, his Pepsi, his laugh. But I'd like to just leave with this thought, or leave you with this thought, that his character and the way that he influenced so many people really stand out as his destiny. And well, for those of us, I'll include myself, whom he touched will forever form his legacy.
My name is Cheryl Rood, and I am the Division Chair for Social Sciences, and I'm honored today to speak on behalf of the faculty and the staff that are working with Phil currently. And as we've listened and remembered to stories this week and reflected about Phil, and for those of us at SC, particularly those of us that are working with him right now, one of the topics that repeatedly is mentioned is Phil's office. So I think we have a picture of his office, Karen. This is Phil's office. I'd like to say thanks to the collegiate staff and Stacy Sparks in particular for sharing this photo with us. And so, as a good, Phil would be proud of me, I did some homework about good offices. And the first thing about a good office that everyone says on every list is that a good office is organized and has open space. I don't know. There's a little circle there. That's an open space. I don't think Phil's office makes number one. Number two that comes up quite often is that a good office has a good chair. Those of you that have been in Phil's office, he used to have office here in Christie, and he has one of them now in Mossman. He has two chairs in his office. One that's okay, and one that is, I think, horrific is a good word for this chair. His granddaughters talked about it this week, about the back falls off of it when you sit on it, but it is important. It's an important chair. He's standing right in front of us, so you cannot see it, so you're spared the visual image of this chair, but he's not, number two, good office, it's not happening, good chair. And a third thing about a great office is good neighbors. Now this one I'm going to give to Phil. He had some good neighbors. Stephen, Carrie, Lindsay, Jackson, those were Phil's neighbors. They were good neighbors, and he was a good neighbor to them. Fourth thing about a great office, temperature control. Now this is a really inside joke if you live in Mossman, but Right across from Phil's office, I believe, is a permanent ladder from Sodexo into the ceiling because we call them so much about temperature control in our office. It's either too hot, too cold, the air is not blowing. So that's a little shaky too. The fifth one I'll talk about is what's really important in a great office is self-expression. We really got that going on here in this office. There are books. There are, so look at our shelves, like they're bending. That's self-expression right there. There's books stacked every way you can fit in there. If you can't see in there, there are blue books in there. There are green pens, red pens, blue pens, all versions of colored pens, and there is stacks of student work and papers in there. That is a self-expression of a teacher, which we have heard is at Phil's heart. These lists go on and on. There's 10, 20, many things they can talk about as an office and multiple options about what deserves to be a good office. But what none of these lists say about how to have a great office, none of these lists say anything about the person in the office. And to us, Phyllis, Allie, Amy, that's what made Phil's office a great office, is Phil. I know you talked with Ashley some about Phil's office was kind of his natural habitat. And those of us who worked every day right around him believe that to be so. And we want you to know that he was a good office neighbor and we loved him and we know that he loved us.
Well, my guess is that while Phil would have loved the laughs and loved the stories, he might have been a little embarrassed of the accolades and that have been given today in his name. His humility and his commitment to serving others, serving God, serving Southwestern, serving her students, is one that didn't go well did not go very well with his desire not to toot his own horn. He didn't want to do that, and yet we've done that here today. And I'm so glad. I know that I can thank each of you who are here today and those who spoke and who shared on behalf of Phil's family for your presence here today. It means so much to them. And after the service, they'll be in the lobby to greet those who wish to speak to them. One of the difficulties in someone passing so unexpectedly is that we still have more to say to Phil, and we acknowledge that he hadn't quite taught us all that we needed to know just yet. And yet the lessons that he has taught us are emblazoned on our minds, on our vocabulary, and on our character. One of the most enduring images of the mound builder is the mound, of course, and I venture to say that Phil probably attended more mound building ceremonies than anyone around. In fact, did he know Dean Allen? I don't know. Did he? I don't know. Okay, anyway. So he knew the mound building ceremony. Today as we leave, I want to invite everyone to visit the mound in Phil's memory. And we have some rocks down there, and I want to invite you to write a word or write a memory, write a hope, write a prayer on a rock and toss it into the mound in Phil's honor. I suppose also that this year it's fitting for our theme on our campus is hope. Despite our own grief, we can have a hope for a different sort of life, the resurrection of a life in Christ. Our benediction today, as we leave, will actually be a song sung by some current students and some alumni. But before we listen, I have one last word. Often, Phil and I would be the last two people in Mossman at the end of the day. And on the rare evening that I would actually leave after him, he would stop by my office, knock on the door, and say, "Well, I'm headed home. I'll leave it to you to turn out the lights." Imagine that's what he's still saying to us. He's gone on ahead, but he's trusting us to take care of what he's left. So Phil, may we do you proud. You've given us so much, and we are truly grateful.